I'm Anna.
I'm Jessica.
And this is the Paranoia Pair.
Welcome back to the show. It's just me again. Happy Halloween. It's one of my favorite times of the year. We got leaves. We got pumpkins. Gotta admit, I don't really love pumpkin spice flavored things. I am basic, but not that basic. To me, they just taste like lipstick. I don't know. Something's wrong with me. Usually we do Reddit episodes at the end of the month, but I thought I would get into the Halloween spirit. Today, I'm going to be covering a few true crime stories of when Halloween turned deadly. For most people, Halloween is a day filled with candy, laughter, and maybe some harmless scares. But unfortunately for some, it didn't stop there. We've all heard the cautionary tale of checking your children's candy, but why did it start? And where did this widespread fear come from? Well, I'm going to tell you. It was Halloween night in 1974, and 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien and his 5-year-old sister Elizabeth went out trick-or-treating with their father, Ronald O'Brien, and some neighborhood friends. They went house to house until they reached one that didn't answer the door. The children ran ahead, like children do. My mom would have beat my ass. And when Ronald caught up to the children, he told the children that the house did answer the door and that they had given him these giant pixie sticks for the kids. Later that night, after they arrived home, Timothy asked if he could have a piece of candy before bed. Ronald handed him one of the pixie sticks, and when Timothy complained about the taste, his father had given him some Kool-Aid to wash the taste out of his mouth, and then Ronald took him to bed. But almost immediately, Timothy began to throw up and convulse, and within an hour, he was dead. Police were called, and the community went into a panic, understandably. The news began to spread quickly that a child had been poisoned by Halloween candy. Parents everywhere began tearing through their kids' trick-or-treat bags, terrified that a stranger might have laced the night's treats with poison. As investigators dug deeper, though, the story began to unravel and the truth was darker than anyone could imagine. Detectives discovered that Timothy's father, Ronald, was drowning in debt and facing financial ruin. Just months before Halloween, he had taken out multiple life insurance policies on both of his children, totaling over $60,000. Does anybody want to guess how much that is in today's month? Did you put your answer in? You're wrong. It was $394,291.28. Detectives even found an old calculator tape back when they printed out the numbers on a piece of paper, kind of like a receipt, from when Ronald was adding up all of his bills, and it came out to almost the exact amount of his life insurance policies that he took out on both of his children. The timing, the evidence, and Ronald's strange, calm demeanor all pointed to something truly fucked up. Forensic tests confirmed that the pixie sticks had been laced with potassium cyanide, which is a lethal poison capable of killing within minutes. It doesn't just stop there though, because investigators found that Ronald had passed out these poisoned pixie sticks to 4 other children, including his daughter, to make it seem like Timothy's death was random. None of the other children had eaten theirs, thankfully though, but one child had tried. He had gone home, showed it to his mother, but she would not let him have it that night. She said that he could have it after school the next day. And what's even more shocking is that this man was a trusted member of his community. He was a deacon at a local church. And I remember these pixie sticks vividly. They were one of my favorite things to get from my local dollar store growing up. So they have the tiny ones that are kind of made in like a paper straw. I hate those ones because once the paper gets wet, the pixie sticks start to stick to it, and then you end up like chewing on the paper, trying to get all of the sugar off of them. And then you swallow it because you are a kid and nothing scares you. The giant ones, though, were made of plastic, and they were sealed by melting the end, and then the label was just stapled onto it. They're about, I want to say like 2 to 2.5 feet long, and they were just filled to the brim with flavored sugar. Every dentist's worst nightmare. I can see how easy it was for Ronald to add the cyanide and to just seal the plastic back up. Literally, you would just have to... Do I want to explain this? Probably. I'm going to not explain how easy... Okay. At trial, prosecutors painted a portrait of a man willing to sacrifice his own child for money, and they would absolutely be correct. Ronald O'Brien's coworkers testified that he had asked about cyanide, how much it would take to kill someone, and where it could be purchased. A witness from a chemical supply company recalled him visiting the store and asking about buying the poison, but he ended up leaving without making a purchase. The evidence was pretty damning, and the jury took less than an hour to convict him of capital murder. And in 1984, nearly 10 years after Timothy's death, Ronald Clark O'Brien was executed by lethal injection, and as he was dying, several people outside the building were yelling "trick or treat." Our second story also takes place on Halloween night in 1957 in the quiet San Fernando Valley. Betty and Peter Fabiano were a well-liked couple who ran a beauty salon together, and they were winding down for the evening. The night had gone as expected, and by midnight, the last trick-or-treaters had come and gone, and Peter was ready to go to bed. But before he fell asleep, the doorbell rang. He was annoyed, but he grabbed the candy bowl and went to answer the door, and he figured it was just some group of teenage kids. When Peter answered the door, he said, "It's a little late for this, isn't it?" And the masked visitor raised a hand, and instead of a bag full of candy, they held a .22 caliber revolver. They fired a single shot, hitting Peter in the chest. He collapsed instantly, and the masked figure ran away. At first, police were completely baffled. To them, the murder seemed random, but as they began to dig more into the Fabianos' lives, something suspicious came to light. Before reconciling with her husband, Betty had shared a close, possibly romantic relationship with her friend Joan, and when Betty returned to Peter and tried to resume her marriage, Joan became jealous and upset, and she was unwilling to let this go, so she began plotting her revenge. She did not act alone, though. She confided in another woman named Goldine Pizer, who became her accomplice, and Goldine was described later to be impressionable and emotionally unstable, and she was manipulated by Joan into believing that Peter Fabiano was a cruel, evil man who deserved to die. They spent months planning Peter's murder. On September 21st, Goldine had purchased a gun from a gun shop in Pasadena. She told the man behind the counter that she needed the weapon for home protection. A few days later, Joan drove Goldine back to the shop where they picked up the gun, which had 2 bullets in it, and Joan paid for the gun. Goldine kept it until Halloween night, when Joan picked her up in a borrowed car. Joan came over to Goldine's house with some clothing, blue jeans, khaki jackets, hats, eye masks, makeup, and red gloves. They dressed up, got in the car, and drove to the Fabianos' home, arriving there around 9 p.m., and waited until the lights went out. When Peter answered the door, Goldine shot him. She ran to the car where Joan waited for her, and they drove to Mrs. Barrett's house, whom Joan had borrowed the car from. They left the car in the street, separated, and walked to their own separate homes. Detectives traced the gun back to Goldine, who quickly confessed and pointed to Joan Rabel as the mastermind. Both women were arrested and charged with murder, and during questioning, Goldine described the shooting as something she did for someone she loved. And the media completely sensationalized every single detail. We have two women, a jealous love affair, and a murder on Halloween night. And in this era, same-sex relationships were illegal and looked down upon, and the case was treated as a scandal and got a lot of attention. When the trial concluded, both Joan and Goldine pled guilty to second-degree murder and were sentenced to prison, and Joan declined to testify. Goldine was released from prison, but it's not known exactly when, but she died on February 11th, 1998 in Los Angeles. It's not really known what happened to Joan. Betty continued as a hairstylist, and she actually joined a salon in Studio City in 1962. She never remarried, and she died in Palm Desert, California on August 9th, 1999. Our next story takes place in a small town in Ohio, where another family's Halloween took an unthinkable turn. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Nothing good has ever come from Ohio, this podcast included. The Liske family seemed pretty normal. William, who went by Bill Liske Sr., had remarried a few years earlier to Suzanne Liske, who had two teenage sons, Derek and Devin, from her first marriage. They were the typical small-town family. They went to church on Sundays, they had family dinners, and they genuinely did their best to make things work. Bill also had an older son from a previous relationship. His name was William Liske Jr., who goes by BJ, and he had a rough past. BJ really struggled with some mental health issues. He had schizoaffective disorder, and he had been in and out of hospitals, therapy, and even jail. Despite that, though, his dad really never gave up on him. Bill really tried to help BJ get better, hoping he could have a normal relationship with his son again. By Halloween 2010, BJ was living in a halfway house, and things between him and the rest of the family were pretty tense, but seemed calm enough that he would visit sometimes. And that's exactly what he did the day before Halloween. He had spent some time with his dad and stepmom, and everything seemed fine. Later that night, BJ went to a Halloween party with some friends. The next morning, on October 31st, Devin came home from church. His mom and stepdad were still in bed, which wasn't too weird. He went upstairs to his room and started playing video games, and he just figured everybody was sleeping in that day. After a while, though, something felt off. The house was too quiet, so he went to check on everyone. When he opened the door to his mom and stepdad's room, he found them both shot multiple times. At first, he thought it was a prank, but he quickly realized that it wasn't. Devin began panicking, and he ran to find his brother Derek, hoping he was okay. But unfortunately, Derek was gone too. He had been beaten to death with a hammer. Devin ran outside and called his aunt, crying and barely able to get any words out. And Devin was only 16 when this had happened. When police got there, they found no sign of forced entry, meaning whoever did this was someone the family trusted. A neighbor told investigators that she'd heard banging, which may have been gunshots, around 6:30 a.m. on Sunday. It didn't take long before they started looking hard at BJ Liske. He'd been at the house recently, and the family's truck was missing. Later that day, police found BJ driving his dad's Ford F-150, and inside was evidence linking him to the murders. There was blood, a gun, and some other items that made it clear that he was the one responsible. Investigators believed that BJ attacked his stepbrother Derek first, beating him to death, and then went upstairs and shot his father and stepmom while they were sleeping. Afterwards, he took his dad's truck and left, acting as if nothing had happened. And when BJ was arrested, he did not put up a fight. He said very little, and his demeanor shifted between calm and confusion. The court later revealed his long history of mental illness, claiming to hear voices, paranoia, and violent outbursts, all things linked to schizoaffective disorder. Evidence did confirm that DNA from BJ's father, stepmother, and stepbrother were on his clothing. In a jailhouse phone call with BJ, his mother asked him about the crime, and BJ had told her that he wasn't sure what had happened and that he couldn't really talk about it. But prosecutors argued that BJ knew exactly what he was doing that night. In 2011, BJ pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And for Devin, the only surviving member of this family, that meant facing the reality that his own half-brother had murdered the people that he loved the most. He later said that it felt like being stuck in a movie he couldn't turn off, one that played over and over in his head. 5 years later, in 2015, BJ was found dead in his prison cell, having taken his own life. And he was just 29 years old. This case is especially heartbreaking because this isn't really about greed or revenge. It's mainly all about mental illness that went untreated. And I don't know. His family generally did try to help him. His father even worked on getting him back on his feet, hoping medication and therapy would help in any way, but I don't know. The small, quiet town of Greenwich, Connecticut was also shaken by a murder discovered on Halloween. Martha Moxley was just 15 years old. She was blonde, outgoing, and the kind of girl that everybody liked. She lived in the Bellhaven neighborhood, which was a gated community where people didn't really worry about locking their doors. On October 30th, 1975, Martha had gone out with a few friends to join in on the usual Mischief Night fun. And Mischief Night is the day before Halloween, and it's supposed to be all about harmless pranks, maybe a little toilet paper on a tree, shaving cream on a car, nothing too serious. 2 brothers from down the street joined the group. Their names were Tommy and Michael Skakel, and they were nephews of Ethel Skakel Kennedy. And yes, it is that Kennedy family. Small world, I suppose. The Skakels were known around town for being wild. Their father, Rushton Skakel, was a wealthy, often absent businessman who left his 7 kids mostly unsupervised. The boys, especially Tommy and Michael, were charming but reckless. Martha hung out with them a lot, especially Tommy, and people said that there was some flirting between them, usual teenage stuff. But that night, Martha was last seen alive around 9:30 p.m. near the Skakel home. Friends said that she was laughing with Tommy in the driveway before she headed home, but she never made it back. The next morning, Halloween Day, 1975, her body was found under a tree in her own backyard. Martha had been beaten to death with a golf club, which had been taken from the Skakel household. The blows were so violent that the club had actually shattered, and the broken shaft was used to stab her. Whoever did it had attacked her with rage. The investigation quickly zeroed in on the Skakel brothers. Both had been with Martha the night before, and the murder weapon came from their home. But the Skakel family's wealth and influence made the case a nightmare for investigators. The family lawyered up immediately. Statements were inconsistent, and alibis were changing constantly. Tommy claimed that he had last seen Martha at 9:30 p.m. and then gone inside to watch TV. Michael, who was 15 at the time, said that he had gone to his cousin's house, but police could never verify that story. Despite all the suspicion, no one was charged. Years had passed, then decades, and the case went cold, collecting dust as rumors spread about cover-ups and connections and privilege protecting the guilty. Meanwhile, the Moxley family lived with heartbreak and frustration. Martha's mother, Dorothy Moxley, never stopped fighting for justice, refusing to let her daughter become just another unsolved case. And it wasn't until late 1990s that the investigation finally caught fire again, thanks to the renewed media attention and some shocking new confessions. In a 1991 tape, Michael Skakel, who was now an adult, told his classmates and friends a disturbing story. He admitted that on the night Martha was killed, he had been outside her window and climbed a tree to spy on her. He also said that he had felt guilty about the last time he saw her. Combined with his violent temper and history of erratic behavior, the statements reignited suspicion. In 2000, 25 years after the murder, Michael Skakel was finally arrested and charged with killing Martha Moxley, and witnesses came forward saying that Michael had confessed to them years earlier, claiming he'd been drunk and angry the night of the murder. In 2002, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. For the Moxley family, it seemed like justice had finally been served, but the story does not end there. Over the next decade, the case went through appeals and retrials, and Michael Skakel's defense argued that his original lawyer had been ineffective, and new witnesses placed him elsewhere that night. After multiple appeals, his conviction was overturned in 2013, reinstated in 2016, and then overturned again in 2018, this time for good. The Connecticut Supreme Court ruled that he hadn't received a fair trial, and Michael Skakel was officially a free man. To this day, the murder of Martha Moxley technically remains unsolved. Many still believe that Michael was responsible, and others think that his older brother Tommy did it. And that's it for tonight's stories. I hope you all have a happy Halloween. Thanks for listening. Have fun. Be safe. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod. And we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.